Welcome in, everybody. It's the Coach Matthew Mitchell Show. I'm your host, Coach Matthew Mitchell. We love it that you have decided to join us this week. We come to you each and every Wednesday, and we have another exciting episode for you this week. Make sure you check us out at CoachMatthewMitchell.com. You can find out everything that we can provide you on your personal growth and leadership journey. We do keynote speeches, workshops, coaching, consulting, and we're also supporting my new book that's a USA Today bestseller, Ready to Win, How Great Leaders Succeed Through Preparation. You can find that anywhere and everywhere that books are sold. And thank you to anyone listening that bought a copy that helped us reach that bestseller list. And we appreciate that. And we're getting so much encouragement from the reviews people are giving us about the book and leaving with us about the book, how it's making a difference in their leadership journey. So if you haven't gotten your copy, make sure you do, because there's some great strategies and tactics that you can use where preparation will powerfully position you to win and up your productivity and just really help you step into your potential. So this week we have a great interview with a dear, dear friend of mine who is one of the kindest people, one of the most interesting people I know, and that is Paul Blair, also known as DJ White Shadow. Paul is a music producer, a musician, a songwriter, and a DJ. He is a Grammy Award winner for his work that he did on the Stars Born soundtrack. 2020 was awarded the Grammy with his work with Lady Gaga. He has done a lot of production work with Lady Gaga, and that's what he's really well known for. But he is so creative, and he really makes an impact on people's lives, and is such an interesting interview today as we hear his story and how he developed into the successful person he is in the music and entertainment business. And I think you'll find this helpful. I think you'll find it fascinating and very entertaining. So let's go to that interview now. Enjoy my interview with Paul Blair. Okay, my brother, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm great. I'm good. It's like an unusually warm Chicago day. It's insane. It's like summertime out here. I'm liking it.
So you are in Chicago today?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, I appreciate you hopping on, and it is always good to be with you. And I thought we would start our audience out by letting them know a little bit about young Paul.
Okay.
And how you navigated your early life and where the artistic inspiration started hitting you, and talk to us a little bit about growing up.
Man, I guess I everybody's got a growing up story, right? My dad went to Vietnam. He didn't actually go to Vietnam. My dad was an engineer. He grew up kind of without a formal education and started just working on motors. He loved racing motorcycles, so he worked on motorcycles. He raced motorcycles, whatever stuff dumb kids do when they're 18, 19, whatever. And then he got drafted, and he went on to work as a mechanic on helicopters. So he never actually made it to Vietnam. He was in Germany the whole time the war was going on. And sorry, my dog's barking at me.
No, let's welcome Kimchi to the show.
Yeah.
Hello, Kimchi.
I don't know why you're so mad. Hold on. Let me stick her over here. Don't move.
Well, we won't do it. We won't go anywhere.
That's a special treat for the viewers. A very excitable, tiny dog. She usually lays around and does nothing. Somebody must have come to the door.
We love it. We love it.
So he ended up working there, came back to the States, got a job on the line at General Motors in Ohio, which I think at the time was pretty common for people that didn't have like a formal education. It was a place where you could make, decent money and be able to, compete. And so he got a job at Lordstown in Ohio. He was from Ohio. So carved out my grandma was my next door neighbor. Like, we lived on a farm, essentially. It was like the runt farm. Any animal that came off my grandpa's farm like ended up in like this little toy barn in our backyard. So I grew up in a pair of overalls with no shirt on, kicking around dirt and picking out eggs out of the chicken coop and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I had a pretty fun childhood. We had a pet cow named Millie, and it was about as farm life as you could possibly get, like growing up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know exactly when it started. My mom has, video, whatever, 8 millimeter camera video of me dancing to "Thank God I'm a Country Boy" when I was like 2 years old, and like my uncle, who's not my dad's youngest brother, he's one of six. He was not that much older than me, and so he introduced me to a lot of music. I remember him giving me like Van Halen and you know what I mean, like Black
Yeah.
Sabbath and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
listened to that and I got a tape. I don't remember where I received the tape from, but it was a hip hop tape called Mr. Magic's Rap Attack, and it was a DJ from New York named Mr. Magic, and it was just this. It had Grandmaster Flash and Houdini and Run DMC and all these things that I'd never quite heard of before, and it just, I don't know, it just stuck to me. So like from then on out, all I wanted to do was like listen to hip hop and hear hip hop and I just found a Polaroid that my mom had taken us of me and two of my buddies in like third grade with like parachute pants on, like breakdancing
Yeah.
in my kitchen, like
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
whatever I could kind of grasp onto, I guess, being on a farm in Ohio. And then my dad took a promotion to run a plant, run a line outside of Detroit. So we moved to Detroit when I was in sixth grade, and then there were DJs on the radio, and I got exposed to a whole different level of culture. Detroit, um, for what it's worth, is like it's a complex city, but it's so musically driven. Like, and at the
Yeah.
time that we moved up there, um, like techno was kind of being born, and there was like it was one of those periods of time that I don't think that that you're living through until after it's far over. But there was like a whole new birth of a new genre of music that was specifically in Detroit. So there was a lot of like eclectic things going on the radio and a lot of eclectic people. And man, I just immersed myself in it as much as I could. Most kids, like, they sneak out to drink or hang out with girls or whatever, and I was sneaking out to like go to like parties and listen to DJs when I was like 16. Like, so it was I
Yeah.
was pretty innocuous. Like, I didn't really get into much trouble. I was just like really uh, completely immersed in music and wanted to get my hands on it whenever I could. So that's in a nutshell, like my formative, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
introduction to music was moving to Detroit and being able to kind of go places and see different kind of things that, I mean, in Ohio, just to be fair, like I love Ohio. My whole family still lives in Ohio, and it's a great spot, but not quite as culturally significant as Detroit was. So I feel pretty lucky to have moved there and grown up there with that.
Well, I think it was an amazing time to be alive for a couple kids like us that were in rural America.
Yeah,
That hip hop exposed us to things that culturally we wouldn't have been exposed to, and really kind of transported you and transformed you to a different place. And so I think that's a really cool part of that emergence at that time that you and I were both lucky enough to be a part of growing up. But then,
yeah,
wow, it's amazing going to Detroit. So much great music has come out of that city. And so as a teenager, it sounds like you wanted to start preparing for a life as a DJ, as a creator, and so at a young age you start going to observe other DJs. What did you start learning when you were sneaking out of the house and going to those parties? What, from a technical side, did you learn skills, or did you learn important things about becoming a DJ?
sure. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that there's a pivotal point in your life, whether it's sports or math or science, or if you want to be an astronaut or you want to be a race car driver or whatever it is that you want to do. It's something that you don't really understand. Like, at that point, you're just doing it because you love it, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, like,
yeah,
for me, like you and I have a similar friend group in a lot of regards, and a lot of my friends are very involved in sports, and I don't understand sports at all. Like, I mean, I played baseball when I was a kid, and I love playing baseball, but and I still love baseball to go and watch it. But I don't even
yeah,
know that when people are like, "Oh, did you see that game that got pitched?" I'm like, I don't know anything about it. I just like to go watch the
yeah,
game, right?
yeah,
So, but it's ingrained, whatever, somehow in our DNA. And when you start when you walk to the river and you see the river and then you get in the river, like you got no choice anymore but to follow the river, right?
Right,
So
right.
my friends that love sports, I don't need to understand anything about sports, but to understand the drive and the passion and the preparation that it takes to not, you don't know that you're preparing for it when you're first preparing for it, right? You're just
Yeah,
in love
right,
with it.
right.
And then
Exactly.
when you start figuring out, because you don't walk into your high school guidance counselor and you know what you should do? You should be a coach of a, you know what I mean? That nobody says
Yeah,
that to
right,
you.
right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, so it's like you and your mind start just piecemealing together whatever kind of information you can get. It's like picking mushrooms in a forest, right? Like you're walking around grabbing stuff and putting it in a basket to see, what you can do with it later, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so for me, I don't know that I knew that I was preparing for it, but again, Detroit has so many unique things that were unavailable in other parts of the country. I try to explain this to people a lot of times, but like back then, you couldn't make you couldn't make a song, put it on an MP3, put it in your computer, go play it for a crowd. It was like this long process where you had to go to a studio, put it on a DAT tape, take the DAT tape to a record plant, have the record plant press it up on an acetate, take the acetate to a club, play the acetate at a club. Like by the time you got from point A to point B, it was a $10,000 operation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't a 2 second operation. So there was a lot of like planning for that. But Detroit at the time, and maybe still, had one of the largest vinyl pressing plants in the United States, and quite frankly, two of the most important record stores in the United States. Like, you know what I mean? Like right next to each other. So people from France and from Germany and from Switzerland were like looking for records from this one record store that you're making. So not to be a jerk about it, but I could make a really crappy record for a lot easier and put it in the store. And just because it was available in the store, it got more airplay than somebody who may be in Kansas City or maybe in, you know what I mean, like Santa
Yeah,
Fe, New
yeah,
Mexico, because
yeah,
for them to get there, it was a $30,000 expedition. But for me,
yeah, yeah,
even though it's $10,000, it was still a lot cheaper than it was for somebody else. So that a lot of Detroit people had like interconnectivity with the record store, and being able just to form those interpersonal relationships, and being able to see the same things. Like you could go to a party, have a discussion with the guy about it at the record store, and that discussion would allow you to be able to have him put records aside for you that nobody else would maybe get. So it's like, I think that it doesn't matter what business you're in, like prepping, letting people see how much you love something allows
mm,
you access into their world, to share that love, which I think at the root, that's like the root of all preparation, right? Like some of it's
yeah,
very clinical and you know repetitively based. You got to keep doing
yeah,
something over and over and over again to prepare. But all of that, if it's not planted in the ground in a big pile of dirt that's like loving what you do, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? If you don't love it, it
yeah,
doesn't matter how much you're doing it. Like so,
yeah,
just falling in love with it at a young age and being able to see it in action, right? If you
yeah,
don't know that if you don't know that there's a house that looks like a dome, when somebody shows you a house that looks like a dome, you're like, oh my god, what is this thing, right? Like you can
yeah,
put things. So being in Detroit, like where things were being born, and seeing it, like having the advantage of seeing it being born and seeing it being utilized and seeing it being like, you know I don't know, just like at the stage, that early of a stage, allowed me to kind of participate and see and understand what the whole process was.
oh, yeah,
Pressing a record, selling the record, giving a percentage to the record store, commiserating with your comrades in the music business. Like, you don't even know you're in the music business yet, but just other DJs who are fired up about stuff. You know, when they show that, you know, they show like 8 Mile. Everybody's seen 8 Mile. Like I used to DJ there when I was
wow.
17. I used to sneak into that place and stand there to carry records for guys. Like I used to watch the shows. I used to talk to the people about like what they were doing and how they were doing it. And I still use that information today. But it wasn't because I was prepared at that time. I didn't think what I do now was possible. I was just doing it
Yeah,
because I loved it. Right.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's awesome. I love
yeah.
that. So, talk about study abroad. I think that's such a interesting piece of your story, and I think some big things happened for you while you were away. Tell our audience about
Yeah,
that experience.
yeah. When you go back and you start talking about these things, right? It's kind of like a mishmash of like things you intended to happen and like what the actual result of because of like what happened, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
for me, again, my dad was in the automotive industry. I was the first person in my entire lineage that I can find that ever went to college, ever had a higher education than high school.
yeah,
So my
yeah.
dad was very, very intense. He was an intense person. And like he was very much focused on me being successful. Because I think that as somebody who didn't have a college education and like that made their own thing, he saw younger guys like passing him in the ranks because of issues with education,
Mm,
right? Like a
mm.
guy who
Yeah,
maybe didn't
yeah,
know. My dad could put together a house with popsicle sticks. He's the most insane, like mechanically, mathematically driven human being I've ever met in my whole life. And
yeah,
so, and so, I think he was watching guys with like less experience and less kind of whatever chops
yeah,
go
yeah.
past them. And so he was taking that information and saying, "Hey, if you want to succeed, you have to do this, 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 and this." So, with his limited scope of what success looked like, he was trying to guide me into a profession in the automotive industry. And part of
Gotcha.
that profession in the automotive industry at the time was learning Japanese because the Japanese, you know, were killing the
Sure. Yeah,
Americans
yeah,
in that come. So like they were doing Detroit was doing a lot of business with Japan. They were a huge lack of people that understood Japanese culture or whatever, and so they offered it in my high school. And so I took it for 4 years. I think my dad thought I was taking it because I wanted to get into the automotive industry. I was taking it because I thought it was the weirdest thing I could possibly do. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I'm a weirdo.
yeah,
So I did 4 years of it in high school, and then subsequently, when I got done with high school, I wanted to go as far as I could away. I wanted to go see as much as I could, learn as much as I
yeah,
could, completely change my environment. And so I went to Michigan State, applied for a program called the Japan Horizon Program, which allowed kids to do a work study. I had to pay for my own school, so it was a work study where they paid you and you went to school. So it was a
yeah,
very much reduced cost from regular tuition. I still got credits from Michigan State, and but you had to be a senior. But I had it for 4 years in high school, which was super rare, and I took the test anyway, and I passed. I was the number two of all the people that applied. I was the number two tester, so like I was at 99.5%. And
wow.
so, but they wouldn't accept me because I wasn't a senior. So they put me on as an alternate. And then somebody dropped out and I got to go. So everybody else I was with were seniors in college. And I was like this 17-year-old kid who just graduated high school.
Yeah,
And so when I went there, it was just like, holy cannoli, like, what am I going to do now? And I mean, I went to classes, I took Ikebana and Japanese history, and we went and did all the ceremonial things, and we learned how to do all this stuff with history and culture. But my ambition was to play music. So I went to every single place I could find that played music, stumbled upon this guy who had lived in California for a while that owned this little tiny bar in a tiny town called Takamatsu, and he had all these records and he had a set of turntables, and I just said, "Hey, I want to do this." And because especially at that time, and especially where I was at, Japanese people had a infatuation kind of with American culture and like American things in general, right?
yeah, yeah,
So because of I was a 6'4", toothpick, Q-tip looking dude that probably was like dragging a giraffe into a bar. People were like interested in people were people were interested in looking at me more than they cared if I was
yeah.
good or bad at DJing.
Right,
So
right.
I used that opportunity to be like, hey, I'm gonna go hand out flyers for this. I'm gonna go do this. You don't have to pay me. All I want to do is DJ. So he let me DJ every Thursday night. They had records there. I learned how to play on the turntables. I built a plane while I was flying it, and every Thursday I threw this party till the end of the tenure that I was in Japan. I still did well in all my studies, and I still did all the educational stuff I had to do, and all the work stuff I had to do. But every Thursday I threw this party, and it ended up being like a real like hands-on learning experience of how to put together a party. And he was happy. I was happy. I was meeting all kinds of people in the music business and seeing, I mean, like music stuff and meeting other
Yeah,
DJs there. And yeah, when I came home, I bought a set of turntables, like real turntables, and I sat in my dorm room and just practiced nonstop. I knew right then that I could do it. I had a practical experience of throwing a party and making money and making people happy. I knew that I could, I knew that I could play records. And at that point, I was like, I'm in college because my dad wants me to be in college and I'm paying for college, but I'm going to pay for it by DJing. That's
Wow.
going to be my job.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was it.
So you got back and you worked your way through college, still DJing.
Yeah, I was like, I was, I joined a fraternity and in that fraternity, like, when you're pledging a fraternity, they pretty much just beat the crap out of you and make you do whatever they want you to do. You gotta get Snickers bars at 3 in the morning or whatever it is that they are making you do. I was like, hey, I can DJ, and they were like, great, we're paying this DJ $200 to come over our house. You're DJing every party of this semester, so we can save the $200. And I was like, great. So like I ended up as a pledge, like DJing all these parties, which
Yeah.
they thought they thought they were shorting me $200, like, and I was just like happy to be there. So
Yeah.
it was a great, it was a great exchange.
Yeah.
So anyway, from there, you know, in the Greek system, I ended up doing a lot of like Greek parties, and coincidentally, my across the hall neighbors were Alpha Phi Alphas, so they were in the we were in two different fraternal groups. There, it's really weird. Like in college, black fraternities and white fraternities, they don't commiserate. So like all the meetings that you go to in the white fraternities don't have any of the black fraternities in them, and vice versa. And so I started learning from these guys that were alphas across the hall from me about how their Greek system worked. We
Yeah.
became like super good friends. One night they had their DJ. They saw how hard I was working in my dorm room every day. You know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
we passed each other. We play NBA '95 or whatever it was out at the time, and
Yeah.
we became friends. They lost a DJ because of a weather, and they were like, "You got to come DJ our party. We don't have another DJ." So I ended up doing their party, and then much like the Japan experience, dragging a 6'4" white dude into
Yeah.
this Alpha Phi Alpha party was like dragging a giraffe into the room. But I
Yeah.
did really well, and from there I ended up doing all the black Greek parties and all the white Greek parties, not just for the
Wow.
alphas, for the Omega Psi Phis, for the deltas, for the
Yeah.
AKAs, for all of them.
Yeah.
And to this day, last week one of my so they made me an honorary member of Alpha Phi Alpha. I ended up stepping in the step show with them my senior year of college, and so because like we were so close, and
Yeah.
for the first time in my college's history, we became brother fraternities with the Alpha Phi Alphas. It was the first time a white fraternity and a black fraternity were brother fraternities in the whole history of the college. And
Wow.
yeah, so we had parties together. We had meetings together. We talked about like what the differences culturally were between what the importance was of being in a black fraternity versus what the importance was, blah blah blah. The differences in pledging, all that stuff. So it was a very, I was like when I took on social chair. Obviously, it was like my big thing because
Of
throwing parties.
course. Of course. Yeah.
But part of the big thing was that we ended up doing this exchange and like ended up knowing a lot about each other. And then it was really crazy because for the last 2 years I was in college, we threw parties together all the time, and I was the DJ for the both of them. So you know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, so
Yeah.
it was like I was playing the same music. It didn't make a difference, but
Yeah.
like every time my guys would walk into the alpha parties, it was like, hey, here come the Backstreet Boys, and like it was like this great relationship, and I just got a call from one of my buddies who's in Richmond, Virginia, who's a doctor, who was an alpha. Was like, hey man, will you come and do my 50th birthday party? And I was like,
Oh,
hell yeah,
wow.
let's do this. So college was like a great experience, not only in like just because music brings people together, right? That's what music's for, is to bring people together. So not only just the business of throwing a party, the interpersonal relationships of like trying to build something that maybe nobody's built before, being able to interact with different groups on different levels. It's like by the time I was done with college, I ran I started a night at a club that was the biggest hip hop club in the entire Midwest. Not just where I was at, but all of Michigan, all of Illinois, all of
Yeah.
whatever. We'd do 2,500 people every Thursday. Broke acts like Nelly, um, the um, Eminem's group. My brain just stopped working. But like Proof and Bazaar and all these guys would come to my party. Mateen Cleaves had his birthday party there, like when we were in college.
Wow.
So just crazy,
Yeah.
crazy things happened. The Fab Five guys, like Jalen Rose and all those guys used to come. Like it was like the biggest hip hop place in the whole in the whole state. So anyway, I operated it from ground up. And so I did that for a couple years. And when I graduated college, I thought I was too old to DJ anymore. So I bought a bar and I ended up like running a bar instead of like DJing at one.
Yeah.
So it's like all of these things, again, I don't know that like you're sitting there thinking like, oh, in order to do this, this, and this, I have to I have to get this, and this done. You're just immersed in something you love. So you will do whatever it takes at all costs to get it done. I will say that there was a lot of nights in college where everybody was drinking and I was not drinking because I was intimately concerned with how the running of the party was going. I would
Yeah.
say that happened probably 90% of the time when I was
Yeah.
in college. I wasn't enjoying the party the same way everybody else was enjoying the party. I was enjoying it because it was working and I didn't want anything
Yeah.
to go sideways. So I mean there's things you sacrifice or things that you might have to change in order to make sure that the ship is still watertight and
Yep.
moving forward.
Yep.
And I think that like in an endeavor where you don't know what there's no prescription because there's no description. You know what I'm saying? There's no
Yeah. Sure.
description of the
Sure.
job. So there's
Yeah.
no like
Yeah.
people are like you gotta take this finance class. You gotta figure this out. You gotta go and learn a business thing. I was just like blinders on. I'm throwing this thing. Nobody can tell me no. I'll cut however I gotta cut through the crowd to get to the end of the party and make sure that it goes off and everybody has a good time. So yeah, I mean, at no point I mean, probably at no point till I was in my 30s did I really know what I was like
Yeah.
gonna do. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was
Yeah.
just like
Yeah. Yeah.
because nobody's there to tell you. I didn't have a. I've never had a mentor. I've never had somebody I could look to and be like, "Hey, I got this problem. Like, what do I do about it?" It's
Yeah.
always like figure it out on your own. So
So it just sounds like you are stacking productive day after productive day after productive day, totally immersed in what you're passionate about, uh, just working like heck to do good work,
yeah,
and so we come to an exciting point in your career where
yeah,
now you can really play at the highest level, and so um, all of that sounds to me like it was preparing you for some really big moments in your career. And I wish you would tell us about your experience with Lady Gaga winning the
oh sure,
Grammy, and just how that all began, and what you learned from that relationship.
sure, yeah. And just to rewind 2 seconds when you're talking about success after success or like thing after thing, it's like one thing that my dad did do that when he didn't know what to do when we were younger was like you have to work harder than everybody else. You have to show up when you say you're going to show up. You have to do the best job that you possibly can, and you have to continue to show up even if you have a bad day. So like the only time I've ever seen my dad like lie for me is when he told whoever the government was that I was 15 instead of 14 to get my work permit. You know what I mean? To like get a job. And then it was like whatever job I got, I was like washing dishes at a
Yeah,
restaurant. He was like, you need two more jobs.
yeah,
Like you got to,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so I
yeah,
was like shining floors at Kmart at night and I was working at a car wash. I was working at McDonald's, like
yeah.
whatever I could do to work. Right. So I think that kind of instilled in me. It was like, you don't really ever know what's going to happen, but there's some general purpose things that apply to everything you do, right?
Yes, yes,
Working harder than everybody else is like tantamount to me. Like that's the thing. While you're taking a break, somebody else is working. So the whole time you're taking a break, you better think about some whatever people are doing while they're doing it, right? And
yeah,
when you
yeah,
get when you're done with your break, you better get out there and do it. So like for me, I never stop working. People like take things in a way like, oh man, you were at the club or you were at the when I'm at six if I go to Six Flags and ride the roller coasters, people are like, oh, that must be fun. I'm listening to what music they're playing in line so I can figure out what the science is behind like whatever. Like my brain just never stops in that
yeah.
regard because that's the way I've trained myself since I was 15. So a lot of times like for work I have to go sit I hey, you got to go to Paris and go to this club and listen to this DJ play because we want to be able to implement that into our strategy for opening this set of hotels. Whoever hired me to do whatever, and so I'm sitting in Paris for 2 days in some nightclub that everybody wants to get into, and I'm shazamming every song on my phone and you know what I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and doing
Yeah.
whatever like the whole time. Like I don't really I guess the
Yeah.
guy that like it works at Burger King doesn't love hamburgers as much anymore. I still love music, but I
Yeah.
definitely am making a lot of hamburgers all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
You're right.
saying?
Sure.
So when it came to the Lady Gaga stuff, and a lot of people ask this, right? Like it's like, you see there's pivotal moments in your career where things happen. And I'll tell you, like before Lady Gaga, there was more of those things. They just pan out in different sort of ways. You got a key, there's 100 locks. You got to know. Sometimes a lock will open a door, and when you open the door, you got to know what you want on the other side of that door before you walk in it, right? So it's like there's been a million opportunities before Gaga to produce stuff for other people. So it's like,
Mm.
hey, you're really good at what you do. Hey, I really like what you do. And you walk into the room, and it's like, I don't think this is gonna fit. So
Mm.
sometimes being good at what you do is knowing what you're not good at or knowing what's not gonna fit, right? Like so it's
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
take everything on, you try and do it. You know, if somebody calls me up and says, "Hey man, like we need somebody to sprint from A to B," like I can run, but I'm probably not the best sprinter of all time. You know what I mean? So let's skip that. Let's skip the sprinting part, but I'll run over here and do this instead. So like
Yeah.
knowing what you're good at is also knowing what you're not good at. So I would say that between the time I was in my mid 20s to the time I was in my mid 30s, there were a lot of like, okay, people are presenting things now. They know I work hard. I have enough experience to figure these things out. Like, let's figure out what you want to do that's going to get you to what the goal is. And my goal has always been like, I want to make important things, right?
Mm.
I want to make
Mm.
important things. And so important things aren't always the most economically viable things, right? Like so like
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
me, there's a lot of dead people that were broke as hell until far after they were dead that are now the most important people, like in,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so,
Right.
so
No
like,
doubt.
to me, it's always been more important to make something that's great, even if it didn't pay the most or people didn't understand it right at the time. And so when you
Yeah.
open some of those early doors, it's like, hey, we're going to give you X amount of dollars to do this. My brain goes to, hey, am I gonna be 90 years old, like picking out melons in a supermarket, and this is gonna come over the speaker, and I'm gonna be like, why did I do that? Like, why in the world did I do that? Because that makes a lot more difference than like getting the check at that particular
Yeah.
point. So I
Yeah.
think I said no to a lot of different opportunities in that between 25 and 35. And then when I met her, it was a very strange way to interact, right? Like, so I I'll try to keep this short, but like basically, I had bought a couple bars in Chicago. I sold my bar in Michigan, moved to Chicago, bought a couple bars in Chicago, sold them at enough of a upswing that I could like kind of sit back and recalibrate what I wanted to do, and
Yeah.
it's always been music. And I always started with DJing. So I was DJing. I was playing in LA. I I was playing a lot of big clubs, and I was approached by somebody that owned one of the clubs that said, "Hey, we want to give you a night." And I said, "I don't want a night here. I want to be able to do something that I want to do somewhere that's nothing's going on. I want to build something from scratch that nobody talks to me whether it's good or bad. I don't have to wait and see if somebody comes in here and buys a bottle and tells me to play a certain song. I don't want to deal with anybody. I want it to come from zero. I want to build it. And when it's good, I want you to tell me that I did a good job. That's it." So they gave me this club called Hyde, completely empty, zero people in there. And I started this night where I was playing stuff that I thought was good. Luther Vandross, Mobb Deep, Terry Hunter, like house music, hip hop music, disco music, but nothing
Yeah.
that was like kind of new. Stuff that was like classic and obscure, but like really great. It took probably 6 weeks until people were like, "Oh, holy cow! Like this is like a crazy night, like something that's not going on." Then all of a sudden, for the next 8 months, I'm dealing with like turning David Beckham and Tom Cruise away, like at the door. You know what I mean? Like it was like
Wow.
crazy,
Yeah.
crazy because like when in LA, once a stone starts rolling, like everybody wants on the stone, and this particular place held 80 people, and so it was nuts. Like the amount of people that were in there was crazy. and I used to invite all my friends who were dancers. So like I'd play the music, there'd be all these in an 80-person room, 30 people in the middle of the floor like dancing their faces off.
Yeah.
It's infectious. So
Yeah.
like then when people would come, it'd be like, oh man, this is a party, this is a party, this is a party. And it wasn't really a party like that in LA at that time. People were kind of like standoffish and look at how cool I am. But when you turn the lights off and like you're not doing like crazy bottle service and you're just playing music, people commiserate around the thing that you love.
Yeah.
And so I happened to have a friend who was a dancer who invited Gaga's dancers in. They came with her creative director. Her creative director was wearing a Chicago White Hot Sox hat. I said something to him about the Sox. He was like, "What kind of music are you playing?" I said, "It's this." He goes, "Make me a tape of it. I got an artist." I didn't know who he was.
Wow.
And so I made him a tape. He was like, "I got this artist I want to introduce you to. This is like the perfect music we want to do. I'm gonna." But in LA, you hear that every 20 minutes, right? Like that's not like an unusual line of
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
So everybody's talking about who they know or what they want to do with you because you're whatever. Now this guy kept his word, and like we ended up talking, and he finally told me what was going on. I said, "Great, I would love to meet her." It was funny because 2 weeks before I figured out she was going on, I actually talked shit about her in something. Like I had said something negative about her, like in an article, like because they released some song, and it wasn't like I was trying to be a jerk about it. It was just like, oh my god, everybody and their mother's asking me for Lady Gaga. I'm so sick of playing Lady Gaga that like I have no idea. Like I just like they were like, what do you hate about DJ? And I was like, Lady Gaga request. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And then like
Wow.
2 weeks later, she's calling me to work on something, and I'm like trying to figure out how to scrub the internet of like me talking junk. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, we ended up like meeting, and I was like, oh my god, this we're the exact same human being. Like the way what she likes and what I like, and her ethos and my ethos, and like the way that she wants to proceed is exactly my skill set. I have the tools,
Wow.
exactly skill set for
Yeah.
this particular artist. So we ended up going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. She came to Chicago. I met her on a Monday again on Chicago, and by Wednesday I was on tour with her, and I didn't get off tour for 10 years. You know what I mean?
Wow.
We
Yeah.
just we just went and went and went and went and rode that. You know, got on that train and rode it until for 12 years almost, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. What are a couple of the things you think you learned in those 12 years that you'll use going forward? That the real takeaway you might share with our audience, and a couple of things that you could pass along.
I think like now people people have always said like the music business is full of jerks, like full of like not the nicest people in the universe,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep. You hear that. Yep.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever people are starting to realize the truth behind that. Like I feel like people are getting like it's like, oh, look at this guy, look at this guy, look at this guy. So like talk about like feet to the fire. It's like one day like I'm sitting at home, the next day like I'm meeting with like some of my heroes, and like they're not that I haven't even met them before, but there was no reason to remember me before. So
Yeah.
it's like I think like the first 2 weeks I was out on tour, a record executive that I had sent probably 10,000 records to over the decade before walks in, listens to a song. I'm sitting there quietly in the back room. I'm in the back of the room. He's talking to her. She's like, "Oh yeah, this is this and this is that." He was like, "Who produced this?" And she was like, "That guy." And I was like, "Oh yeah, hi, I'm Paul." And then and he was like, "Oh man, we got to get you in with some of our artists." I was like, "Well, I want to pull this up for you. Like I actually sent you this track like a year and a half ago, like to you directly. Here is the email.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think some of the things, and I didn't say it like in a mean way. I wasn't trying to be mean, but some of the things that you learn are like how not to overlook people, how to treat people like equally, how to
Mm.
demand like people treat you equally, like how to say again, like how to say no to things that aren't good for you. How to discern like between quick success and like long-term success. Like it's a big deal. Like and I think that like you with anything else when you're doing stuff, you have to be open to the idea that you're going to have plenty of failures and that what
Mm.
what it is to take away from those failures. And I think at the level that I was participating in. There was like a little bit of ignorance is bliss at the beginning, but like once you start digging into it, the music business is a very much a business of like sharks. It's a very shark filled business with people just trying to take from you all the time. And
Mm.
so, what to give away, what not to give away, how to understand what people's like motivations are, like maintaining your spirit while people are trying to, move you around in ways that you don't want to get moved around. I think a lot of what I learned about the music business was really like life lessons about how I always tell people like I've become more of a psychologist than I have like a music producer over
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah.
Um, the amount of times you would deliver something, everybody would listen to it, hit you back immediately with all their opinions, and say, "We need this, 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 and this." At the beginning, I would go through and change, hand it back in. Oh yeah, this is great. Learning that people really didn't care. It was good the first time, and people didn't really care. They just wanted to say, like, I told Paul to change the hi hats in this. The amount of times that I took a song when people were like, you need to change this, this, and this, I'd be like, okay, great. And then I just wait a week and give them back the exact same thing that I gave them the first time. They'd be like, this is great. It's
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Knowing that it's not the work, they're not asking you to do the work. They just want the input so that when the song comes out and it's like the super big song, they can say, I worked with Paul on this.
Yeah.
It's like, and then also being understand when people actually have really good opinions and knowing the difference between learning between one opinion and the other opinion. I think in life, nothing is easily boiled down to like one thing. But like if you have to boil something down in the music business, it's like it boils down to uh staying in love with what you're doing. Like you can't be in
Mm.
love with anything else except for music, right? Like
Mm.
you have to love music because there's so many times where you don't have money, you don't have somebody to talk to, you're out like on your own, you're getting completely, you know, beat up about stuff. And
Yeah.
you love music that kind of doesn't sting as hard, the rejection or like the whatever doesn't sting as hard. But then also I think just being aware, accepting failure and like being able to bounce back, which I'm sure is true in most businesses, right? Like most things. It's like sometimes your greatest failure, depending on how you utilize it, can
Yeah.
become like a monster asset. Like,
Sure.
a
Yep.
monster asset. Like so I think that I tell people all the time, like if I had as much music knowledge in my head as a nuclear physics, like me and Elon Musk would be right on top of each other. I just know so much about this one thing, and
Yeah.
like I've stuck myself in this thing so much that like sometimes you know I think the lessons are the same. I think that like there's a lot of times where you know I wish I could apply all the stuff that I did in music to something that was like more charitable or like you know what I mean, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that like now that I'm older, like some of the music that I made that's changed people's lives is like the last 5 years I've really focused on like trying to give back and teach people and be a mentor for people
Yeah.
instead of like I've learned enough to be able to be a mentor and be able to change some things for people, which has been very rewarding. Learning what not to do for other people has been a big thing for me. I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, your love for music and just you sharing this passion today, I know is going to benefit people. I want to let the audience know, just being in your presence, man, you've got an incredible spirit. You've got an incredible kindness about you. And um, what you just described that you'd learned about how to treat people, man, you are at the absolute top of the heap.
Oh,
And
thanks.
one of my favorite people ever to be around. And we've had some magic moments together around music, and it's just been a blast having you on today. And I'm proud to call you my friend.
Yeah, same, man. And then listen, I am inspired by you as well, and not just because of what you. Again, I am fully aware of your accomplishments as like a coach and as like a mentor for people, and like I admire the fact that you took on that as like a profession, like because like the most people can't do that. I mean, like, can't tell other people how to make themselves better. Like, what an admirable profession. But the grace and like fun, the overarching like spirit that you brought to like the game, like watching your dances and stuff, like where you know, it's mind blowing to me, like the personality you brought to it. And I'll tell you this, man, I don't know how many people that listen to you know like that you're a great music person. Like, I think it's amazing that like you have followed this passion of yours. Man, life is about following passion, being kind to people, working hard, making a difference, right? And I think you
Yeah.
embody all of those things. And like whatever you did to prepare for that, or whatever you're doing right now to help other people prepare for their thing, I think it's really admirable. So thanks for having me on. I hope I was not too big of a weirdo.
You were amazing, and we'll do it again sometime, and I can't wait. I know we'll be together soon here, buddy. But
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on, and all the best to you, and appreciate what you shared today.
No problem, man. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Talk to you soon.
See you, buddy. Well, how much fun was that, everybody? Paul Blair, DJ White Shadow. Amazing, amazing person, and I just enjoyed that. I hope you did too. 3 things I want to share with you that stood out to me from that interview. Number 1, when you're immersed in something you love, Paul says you'll do whatever it takes to achieve success. And you could tell by that how passionate he was about music and about being successful. And he just had such a positive attitude. But that's fueled by getting in touch with something that we genuinely love to do. And I love that insight from Paul. Number 2, learn to discern the difference between short-term success and long-term success. And that's something that we cover extensively in my new book, Ready to Win, How Great Leaders Succeed Through Preparation. We really talk about sustaining success. And I love the insight that Paul shared with us there about, how really building our life and our leadership and strengthening our leadership where we get to a spot where we can sustain success. So I loved him sharing that. And finally, acknowledge that you're going to have failures and use those failures as opportunities to learn and grow. We've said it before on the podcast, life is so volatile. There's a volatility to life that when we accept that volatility is going to exist, that's when we open ourselves up for these opportunities that come our way where we can learn and grow that the world so oftentimes views as a failure. But when we get our mindset to a place of seeing the setbacks in life, seeing the challenges in life as opportunities to learn and grow, that's when we really start to take off, and that's when we just add rocket fuel to our progress and our advancement toward the person that we want to be. So just love spending that time with Paul Blair. I hope you did too. Such a kind, wonderful soul and such an accomplished person in his field and in the music industry. And really appreciate him being a guest on the show today. Go to CoachMatthewMitchell.com and find out how we can step into your world and help you move forward. Book a call with us, and we would love to walk alongside you in your personal growth development and in the development of your business and the team that you have that's helping you be successful. We'd love to support you in that. So you can find us at CoachMatthewMitchell.com. Please continue to come back to the Coach Matthew Mitchell Show. We love doing this. And we would appreciate it if you would subscribe. And if you consume this through Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. But we will be back each and every Wednesday. We thank you for joining us this Wednesday. Hope you enjoyed our time with Paul Blair. And we can't wait to see you again next week.